All right. Well, it's interesting. We're talking about the automated factory, and we're talking about in terms of equipment. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about automation, but in terms of software, and in particular, QMS software. So, quality management system software, and that's the software that helps you run your quality management systems and so forth, has become strategic in many businesses today. And as Tim Lozier wrote in his article, Building the Story of Quality, with new versions of QMS standards coming out and the enrollment of all the people in quality management effort, the need for cohesion from one system to the next has become even more critical. Getting everybody on board in some sort of way that makes sense and isn't scattered has gotten more critical and more difficult. So, kind of really gone are the days for most enterprises where a QMS can be handled from an Excel spreadsheet, which is really the way people did it back in the early days. Right. You kind of kept track of everything on the tool you had at hand, which was a spreadsheet.
Before
right?
that was paper and pencil.
Or paper and pencil
yeah,
before that.
Yeah.
So QMS software is really the directions many companies need to go if they want to get the most out of their quality management system implication. So here to talk about QMS software a bit is our frequent guest, Tim Lozier, Director of Product Strategy for ETQ. Hi, Tim.
Hey guys, how are you?
Oh, pretty good.
How you doing, Tim?
So, Tim,
I'm at my user conference now, so
that's right. But we've
right.
been to the ETQ user conference, and again, something that's very, very solutions oriented. We've been to a couple of them. I've been to a couple of them, and again, user conferences really valuable. A lot of good information. So, you mentioned a term you used in here, right in the title of your article, and also in the story in the article itself was the story of quality, and I thought that was kind of catchy. Explain to us what you mean by that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think story is a great way to say it. And if you think about kind of what the mindset shifts that a lot of these companies are going through now, with the new standards coming out and having more stakeholders enrolled in the quality effort, I think the idea of having a true visibility from all areas of the business becomes really a contributor to that story of quality. So you have, companies who have supply chains, and they have design, and they have production, and in all different areas of the business. And what I think is important is that when you start connecting all those areas and you start having those processes harmonized and integrated, you start to really round out a more traceable method of looking at quality. It becomes a story, and it's one that everybody in the operation can really benefit from and contribute to. So what we try to encourage is through the concepts of integration and harmonization and getting all on one page, you can really round out that story of quality so you understand what things happen from event detection to event correction all the way to improvement.
So Tim, when you talk about QMS software in your article here on the show or in the webinar we're going to be doing coming up next week, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it helps to integrate these other software systems, the ERP systems, the MES systems that we talk about a lot. A couple of thoughts. And the first one is, how hard is it to really get those systems integrated into your QMS software? I mean, integration might scare some people away to a certain extent from maybe even considering a QMS software implementation.
Yeah, so I mean, I think right now there's always been this stigma around integration as being something where I have to now go through the effort to stitch two systems together, and it's a lot of work. And do I really want to go through that work? And I think the way technology has kind of evolved in the last couple of years is that the idea of integration, and you see this with a lot of major software platforms, you see this with a lot of point solutions even, where the integration can be very simple. It could be very user-friendly. It could be very easy to do. And my recommendation to anybody who's looking to integrate is to really look at where the simplest integration can happen and start there. Start simple. Get those early wins to understand how I can pull information in, make it meaningful, be able to get information out, and really create a hub where quality can pull information in, push it out, and interact with all these other systems. So integration is a lot easier now because companies are starting to realize that it's not only necessary, but if you can't do it very seamlessly, very easily, you're not going to be able to work with those systems.
So you're saying basically get your QMS software system installed and then maybe slowly roll out the connections between your QMS software and your ERP or your QMS and your MES and CRMs and so forth. Just kind of take them kind of a bite at a time rather than trying to do the whole integration all at once.
Yeah, I think a lot of people try to look at the entire picture and try and get it all done at once. And I think it all comes back to really road mapping out what's most important to you now. It could be as simple as looking up from your ERP system and pulling information in. And now you've done what you've done by just doing that is eliminated double entry. So rather than having to manually enter information in the QMS that was in your ERP system, all you're doing is a lookup and you're pulling that information in. And you think that's a very simple thing, that's a simple way to start, but you think about the time saved in just that alone. And those are really simple integrations. And as you start to really get your feet around those types of integrations, you can start to expand it and say, okay, well now I want to push information back to my ERP, or I want to push information into the MES or my supply chain. So it becomes kind of a road mapping exercise where you say, what's most important today, and how do I kind of build that story of integration along with my story of quality.
And another thing that occurred to me when we talk about a story is everybody wants to tell the story their own way. They have their own process. They run their QMS in a particular way. And is there concern among people who want to get a QMS software that they're going to be pigeonholed into some sort of templatized system? This is the way you have to run your QMS because this is the software, the way the software is laid out and so forth. Is there the ability to adapt software to your own site or to multiple sites and really to make it work the way you want it to work, not the way some software developer thought it should work?
Yeah, and I think that's become a big shift in technology in general, is that, there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution anymore. I think, companies are building out technology that allows for a level of flexibility or configurability. And one of the things that we talk about in terms of the story of quality is the idea of harmonization. And when people think of harmonization, they often confuse it with standardization, which is that rigid one-size-fits-all, you can't do anything. What harmonization seeks to really do is to say, okay, we have a corporate framework, a corporate process that we want to map to, and we're going to have the software map to that corporate main process. But that doesn't mean that site level or location level or product line level can't adapt their own variations of it. So harmonization keeps the main corporate compliance piece intact, but allows for the flexibility and the variability from site to site, from product line to product line, to be able to change their software process and change the process to meet exactly what they need. And that's really where the power of automation comes in, is you want to automate what you do already well. And you don't want to necessarily have to change your entire operation just because a software system can't help you with that. And I think the idea of harmonization, which keeps everything common in one place, is great, but it also needs to have a level of variability so that companies who have very unique processes that deviate from that corporate framework can actually make it work for them.
So Tim, you write that that leaders may not necessarily speak the language of quality, but they certainly speak and understand the language of risk. So how do you kind of use that as leverage to get them to think a little more deeply about their QMS?
Well, when you start thinking about the story of quality, which is something I'm very near and dear to me, I think it's a great term to really explain how an enterprise really looks at it. And when you start looking at the mindset, you want a lot of people to contribute to quality. You want quality to be everybody's best interests, and everybody wants to be a part of that. And so when you start to use nomenclature like quality-related nomenclature, nonconformities or deviations or kappa, any of those things, it can tend to get lost in translation. And so I love what the standards are starting to do, and I like the whole idea of this risk-based thinking, because what it does is it kind of takes the quality nomenclature out of the equation. Yes, it is relating to some of these quality efforts and quality metrics, but when you break it down into risk, it becomes consumable to everybody in the industry, everybody in the company. Everybody can speak risk. So you can identify all these issues in quality, translate them to a risk that is affecting the business as a whole, and now everybody can say, okay, I understand this now. I know that this is a key area that I have to focus on because it's a high risk. So risk-based thinking serves two purposes. One, it allows us to be a little bit more quantitative. It allows us to be a little bit more deliberate in how we look at thinking about potential hazards and the exposure to those hazards. But at the same time, when we report on high-risk areas, there's more than just one area in the business that can actually consume it, benefit from it, and seek to improve upon it.
Okay, well, Tim Lozier, Director of Product Strategy for ETQ, thanks for joining us. Tim and myself will be hosting a webinar next week that's going to build on this topic that we talked about today, building the story of quality, integration, harmonization, and risk-based thinking. As I said, Tim here is going to be your presenter, and I'll be the dumb guy asking the questions. So check it out. The event is this coming Tuesday, June 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. There's a link to register in Tim's article, and also down below the player page, you'll see a link that'll take you out to the registration page. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Great. Okay. See you next week.
We'll see you on Tuesday, Tim. Thanks.